Emily Carter, a 22-year-old waitress at Benny's Diner, was used to seeing all kinds of customers. But on a cold, rainy evening, an old man walked in looking weary and frail. He sat in the corner, staring at the menu with tired eyes. Emily noticed he kept counting the few crumpled bills in his hand, hesitation written all over his face. When he finally ordered a small bowl of soup and a glass of water, Emily felt a pang of sympathy. Without thinking twice, she quietly told the cashier, "Put his meal on my tab." The old man, unaware of her gesture, ate slowly, savoring every bite. As he finished, he patted his pockets and frowned. Emily walked over and smiled. "It's covered," she whispered. The man looked at her with gratitude, his eyes shining. "Thank you, dear. You have a kind heart," he said softly before leaving. Emily thought nothing of it, just another act of kindness in her daily routine. 3 days later, Emily was in the middle of a busy shift when a man in a sharp black suit entered the diner. He scanned the room before locking eyes with her. "Emily Carter?" he asked, his voice formal but not unkind. She nodded hesitantly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, that's me. I'm Daniel Whitmore, attorney at law. I need to speak with you regarding Mr. Henry Delacroix." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She barely remembered the name, but something about the way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. Emily felt her stomach twist with anxiety. She barely remembered the old man's name, Henry Delacroix, but the attorney standing before her made it sound important. "I don't understand," she said hesitantly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Why would a lawyer need to talk to me?" Daniel Whitmore gave her a patient smile. "I'd rather discuss this in private." He gestured toward an empty booth. Emily hesitated, then nodded and sat down. The lawyer placed a briefcase on the table, unclasped it, and pulled out a thick envelope. "Mr. Delacroix passed away 2 days ago," he said gently. Emily's eyes widened. "Oh, I'm so sorry." Whitmore continued, "Before his passing, he left specific instructions regarding you." Emily's heartbeat pounded in her ears. "Me?" Whitmore slid the envelope toward her. "Mr. Delacroix left you something in his will." Emily's fingers trembled as she reached for it. She had only bought the man a meal. Why would he leave her anything? Emily opened the envelope with shaky hands. Inside was a handwritten letter, the elegant script fading at the edges. "Dear Emily, you showed me kindness when the world turned away. That single act of compassion meant more to me than you'll ever know. I don't have much time left, but I wanted to make sure you received this. Go to 42 Maple Street and ask for Margaret. She will explain everything. Sincerely, Henry Delacroix." Emily stared at the letter in disbelief. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Who's Margaret? What's at 42 Maple Street?" Whitmore closed his briefcase. "That's for you to find out." Emily glanced at the address again, her mind racing. Something told her this was only the beginning. Emily couldn't shake the curiosity burning inside her. After her shift, she took a cab to 42 Maple Street, a quiet, well-kept neighborhood on the other side of town. The house was a large Victorian-style home, its paint slightly worn but still grand. She rang the doorbell, her heart pounding. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with piercing blue eyes. "You must be Emily," the woman said with a knowing smile. Emily nodded. "Are you Margaret?" "I am." She stepped aside. "Come in, dear. There's something you need to see." Emily hesitated but stepped inside. The house smelled of old books and fresh-baked bread. As Margaret led her into a cozy sitting room, Emily noticed a large portrait above the fireplace. Her breath caught. It was a younger Henry Delacroix, smiling, dressed in a fine suit. But beside him stood a woman who looked eerily familiar. Emily's mother. Her legs nearly gave out. How do you know my mother?" Margaret's expression softened. "Because, dear, Henry Delacroix was your grandfather." Emily felt as if the air had been knocked from her lungs. My grandfather," she whispered. Margaret nodded. "Henry was a complicated man, but he loved his family. He lost touch with your mother years ago. When he found out about you, he wanted to make things right." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Her mother had never spoken of her father. She had grown up believing she had no family except for her mom, who passed away 5 years ago. Margaret reached for Emily's hand. "Before he died, Henry wanted you to know the truth. He left something for you." Emily swallowed hard. "What did he leave me?" Margaret stood and retrieved a small wooden box from the mantel. She handed it to Emily. This. Emily opened the lid, revealing an old key, a faded photograph, and a letter addressed to her. Her hands shook as she unfolded the letter. Emily, I am sorry for the years we lost. I was a fool to let pride keep me from finding your mother. I never stopped looking. I hope this gift helps you build the future you deserve. Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks. She had spent years struggling, believing she had no one. And yet, here was proof that someone had been looking for her all along. But what did the key unlock? Emily traced the edges of the old key with her fingertips, her mind racing. What could it possibly unlock? Margaret watched her carefully. That key opened something important, Emily. Henry was very private about it, but he insisted you be the one to find out. Emily glanced up, her heart pounding. Do you know where it leads? Margaret hesitated, then nodded. Henry owned a storage unit on the edge of town. He never told me what was inside, but he mentioned that when the time was right, you'd understand everything. A storage unit? Emily's pulse quickened. Was it money? Family heirlooms? Or was there something else her grandfather had hidden? Margaret handed her an address scribbled on a piece of paper. It's at the Maplewood Storage Facility. Unit 314. Emily stared at the key in her hand. This wasn't just a random gift. It was a piece of a much bigger puzzle. She took a deep breath and stood. I need to see what's inside. Margaret smiled faintly. Then go, dear. But be prepared, Henry's secrets might change everything you thought you knew. The next morning, Emily took a cab to the Maplewood Storage Facility. The air was crisp, and the rows of metal storage units stood silently under the grey sky. She found Unit 314 and hesitated. Her hands trembled as she inserted the key into the rusted lock. It turned with a loud click, and the metal door creaked as she pulled it open. Dust swirled in the dim light. The unit wasn't filled with gold or expensive antiques. Instead, there were boxes. Dozens of them, stacked neatly against the walls. Emily picked up the first box and opened it. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, addressed to her mother. Her breath caught. They were from Henry Delacroix. She picked up one and unfolded it. The date read 1998, the year she was born. Dear Lily, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know, I never stopped loving you. Please, let me be part of Emily's life. I want to meet my granddaughter. Tears blurred Emily's vision. Her grandfather had written to her mother for years, but she had never seen a single letter. Her mother had kept this from her. And that meant only one thing. Her mother had hidden something even bigger than she had ever imagined. Emily wiped her tears and reached for the next box. She had to know the truth. Emily's hands shook as she opened more boxes. Letters, legal documents, photographs, all evidence that Henry Delacroix had spent years trying to reconnect with her mother. She unfolded a letter from 10 years ago. Lily, I don't care about the past. I just want to know my granddaughter is safe. Please, don't shut me out. Emily's throat tightened. If Henry had been desperate to see her, why had her mother kept him away? Then, at the bottom of one box, she found something different. A sealed envelope marked, "For Emily, when she's ready." Her pulse pounded as she tore it open. Inside was a bank document, and what she saw made her gasp. Her name was listed as the beneficiary of a trust fund. $2.5 million. She staggered back. Her grandfather had left her a fortune. But why had her mother never told her? There had to be more to the story. And Emily wasn't leaving until she found out. Emily returned to Margaret's house, the letter clutched in her hands. Why did my mother hide this from me? She demanded. Margaret sighed. Your mother and Henry had a falling out. She was afraid of him, but not because he was dangerous. She was afraid of what he represented. Emily frowned. What do you mean? Margaret hesitated. Henry was wealthy, Emily. Your mother wanted you to have a simple life, free from expectations. She feared that if he found you, he'd try to control your future. Emily's stomach twisted. Had her mother really kept her from a better life just to protect her from wealth? Or was there something deeper? Margaret's face grew serious. There's one more thing you need to know. Before your mother cut ties with Henry, he told her he suspected someone was after his fortune. Emily's blood ran cold. What are you saying? Margaret met her eyes. Your grandfather didn't just die, Emily. He was afraid, and now, you need to be careful. Emily couldn't shake Margaret's words as she lay awake that night. If Henry had been afraid for his life, did that mean someone had been trying to stop him from reaching her? Who would do that? And why? She flipped through the documents again. The trust fund was supposed to be activated when she turned 25. That was 3 years away. But with Henry gone, the lawyer had come to her early. Could someone have killed Henry to stop her from getting the money? A sudden thought hit her. Was she in danger too? She had to find out the truth before it was too late. The next morning, Emily met with Daniel Whitmore again. Was Henry's death investigated? She asked. The lawyer hesitated. It was ruled natural causes. But, he did tell me a few weeks ago that he felt uneasy. Like someone was watching him. Emily's stomach twisted. Did he say who? Whitmore shook his head. No. But he did say that if anything happened to him, you should be careful who you trust. Emily's heart pounded. Henry had been trying to protect her. And now, whoever was after his fortune might come for her next. That evening, Emily left the diner late. As she walked toward her apartment, she noticed a black car parked across the street. The same car she had seen at the storage facility earlier. Her hands tightened into fists. Was someone following her? She quickened her pace, but footsteps echoed behind her. A shiver ran down her spine. Just as she turned the corner, a voice called out. Miss Carter, we need to talk. Emily spun around, and froze. A man in a dark coat stared at her with cold, knowing eyes. She had just stepped into the middle of something dangerous. Emily stood frozen, her pulse hammering. Who are you? She demanded. The man smirked. Let's just say I worked for Henry. And I know things you don't. Emily clenched her fists. Like what? He stepped closer. Like the fact that someone very powerful didn't want you to inherit that money. Emily's breath caught. Who? The man hesitated, then whispered, your mother. Emily's world tilted. That's impossible, she snapped. She died 5 years ago. The man chuckled darkly. Did she? Emily's head spun. Had her mother faked her death to keep Henry's money from her? Over the next few weeks, the truth unraveled. Her mother had been alive, hiding, afraid that Henry's wealth would destroy Emily's life. But in the process, she had stolen Emily's chance to know the only family she had left. In the end, Emily had a choice: fight for the fortune Henry had left her, or walk away. She stood before the lawyer's desk, holding the final document that would give her access to the trust. This wasn't just about money. It was about justice. She picked up the pen, and signed. As she walked out of the office, she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same again. Don't forget to subscribe, like and comment for more interesting stories on Plus Stories.